Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland's exceptional cartoon Rick and Morty is known for a couple things: nonsensical catchphrases,
Wubba lubba dub dub!
science fiction escapades, and plot lines that can go from silly to dark at the drop of a hat. Also making a bunch of people care way too much about a kind of chicken nugget
I want
sauce.
that Mulan McNugget sauce, Morty!
The show has some pretty great and underappreciated elements as well. It has a lot of character growth and running plot lines, considering its episodes are mostly disconnected and feature self-contained adventures. The most enticing of these plot lines center on the character known only as Evil Morty. It seems more than likely that this villainous Morty is Rick's original Morty, and he bears some kind of grudge against his grandfather. Grab your portal gun, because in this episode we're getting right into what's going on in this theory and why it makes sense. Evil Morty is, well, just that, an evil version of Morty Smith, one of the main protagonists of the show. How he came to play such a big role in the series is a bit more complicated, though. Rick and Morty features the ritual characters going on a lot of misadventures based on sci-fi tropes and concepts. In this very first season, the show introduced the concept of multiple universes and established that Rick can easily travel between them. While Rick mostly uses this technology to take the two on terrific adventures, he also uses it to escape less than ideal situations. Like in the episode Rick Potion number 9, when the two travel to an almost identical universe after they wreck the one they're currently in. This migration also involves Morty burying a copy of himself in a shallow grave and then taking the copy's place. He doesn't really take that all too well, but he seems to be coping by the time season 2 rolls around, at least by the standards of the Rick and Morty universe.
I know how to vacuum Mom and Dad's summer. I've been doing it for 6 months.
This interdimensional travel means that Rick and Morty run into other versions of themselves quite a bit. Most of the time they're identical to the main characters, which are designated Rick and Morty C-137 after their home universe.
Hey, what do you know? It's a cowboy version of me. Jeez, you're easy to impress.
Other times these counterparts will have different haircuts or some kind of gimmick, like Salesperson Rick, or a version of Morty that's a sentient hammer for some reason. The differences between these versions of the characters leads to conflict sometimes. For instance, the main Rick of the show refused to join the Citadel of Ricks, which is an interdimensional government created by other versions of himself. This is the setup going into the 10th episode of Season 1, Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind. Here, an episode of Rick went around eliminating other Ricks and kidnapping their Mortys. Main Rick was framed for this, so he and the show's central Morty got roped into apprehending the real criminals to clear their names. At the end of the episode, we discover that the evil Rick was just a robot and that Evil Morty was controlling him. We don't see much of Evil Morty after his initial appearance, and he only pops up again in the 7th episode of Season 3, Tales from the Citadel. Here, Evil Morty schemes his way through the political landscape of the Citadel and becomes the president. He quickly and secretly executes his political rivals and implies that he will quickly begin working on his next evil plot. That's pretty much all we've seen and know about Evil Morty so far. And no, seriously, he's only been in 2 episodes, but is a central figure in one of the biggest and most popular fan theories of the show. That's because, if that's true, this theory has massive ramifications for the show's characters and future storylines. Rick would probably say that none of this matters, but for those of us who aren't clinically apathetic, that's a pretty big deal. The first major clue that Evil Morty is Rick's original Morty is that Rick's backstory just doesn't add up, and it's not because he's the only smart one enough to understand the math. Rick abandoned his daughter Beth and his wife, who might be named Diane, about 20 years prior to the start of the series. We don't really know why he left or what he did during that period, but it almost certainly involved some sci-fi escapades. When he returns, Beth is now married to Jerry Smith, and their children, Summer and Morty, are 17 and 14 respectively. It's suggested that this is Beth's first time seeing her father in 20 years, and that neither Summer nor Morty have met their grandfather prior to this. However, in Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, we see a memory of Rick playing with an infant Morty. This segment happens when evil robot Rick is digging around through main Rick's memories using a torture device. We also see a picture of Rick holding a baby Morty in episode 5 of season 2 titled Get Swifty.
Time to get swifty in here.
This happens when Morty ends up in the home of Rick's longtime friend, Bird Person. The episode doesn't focus on this photo for too long, but it still runs counter to the fact that Rick hadn't seen Beth and her family for 20 years. The most likely explanation for this inconsistency is that Rick had a previous Morty, was involved in that Morty's life for some time, and then something happened to make him partner with the main Morty. Rick even seems to imply that something along those lines happened at the end of Close Encounters of the Rick kind. He says that a cocky Morty can lead to some big problems. Rick also refuses to elaborate on that point, and instead tells Morty that he'll explain when the sidekick is older.
I'll explain when you're older.
This heavily suggests that something pretty bad happened during him and a previous Morty. There are also plenty of hints suggesting that the main Rick's previous Morty was in fact Evil Morty. For instance, the mad scientist claims that he is the Rickest Rick, and that by implication he would have the Mortiest Morty.
Mortiest Morty.
Just don't get too big for your loafers, Buster Brown.
However, multiple universes in Rick and Morty don't seem to work in a way that would have that be the case naturally. While most universes in the show are functionally identical to each other, the ones that are different have changes that all run across a consistent theme. Like when Rick and Morty travel to a universe where chairs are people, people are chairs, phones are food, and food is shaped like phones. That's why it would be odd if the main Rick and Morty were from a universe where everyone would be the most intense version of themselves, because it would only make people less alike. Instead, it's more like the main Rick is from the Rickest universe, and that he partnered from the Mortiest universe after things went sour with Evil Morty or the Rickest Morty. That would explain why Evil Morty is so much smarter and morally ambiguous than any other Morty, because he is the Morty that's most like Rick. Then again, most Ricks are egomaniacs, and it's possible that the main Rick is overstating the intensity of his Rickness. Either way, Evil Morty does have a grudge against the main Rick, and them having a past relationship is the easiest explanation for that contempt. It'd also make quite a bit of sense thematically for Evil Morty to be the main Rick's original Morty. Rick's entire character pretty much boils down to a man who is smart enough to run away from all of his problems and any negative consequences of his actions. If he accidentally turns all humans into Cronenberg monsters, he can just go to a reality where he can have a fresh start. If he ruins a relationship with someone, he can just erase their memories so things are fine between them. He can continue to indulge in his self-destructive behavior because he can undo the worst effects of those actions. This element of his character was even acknowledged in the third episode of Season 3 titled Pickle Rick, where Rick goes to life-threatening lengths to avoid a single session of family therapy.
Where's your grandpa?
Right here, sweetie. I'm a pickle.
Evil Morty, though, is one part of his past he won't be able to run away from. He eliminated several Ricks and is now the leader of what might be the most powerful interdimensional group in the series. If anyone can go toe-to-toe with the Rickest Rick Sanchez, it's his original Morty who is now fueled by vengeance. Rick is going to have to deal with whatever bad or regrettable thing he did to make Evil Morty despise him. A problem that he's not smart enough to escape from is exactly what Rick needs to grow as a character. Evil Morty will force Rick to acknowledge his many bad habits and try to be a better person as a result. Evil Morty, being Rick's original Morty, is also a great opportunity for the main Morty to grow as a character and better define his relationship with his grandfather. It's obvious that Morty loves Rick and understands him better than anyone else. He's easily able to undo Rick's drunken schemes in the fourth episode of Season 3 titled Vindicators 3: Return of Worldender. Morty also doesn't hold Summer's unwavering admiration of Rick and realizes that his grandfather is deeply troubled. While Morty seems to make the most of his adventures with Rick, he seems pretty indifferent towards them by the end of Season 3. That's because he never really chose for these sci-fi shenanigans to be a part of his life. Rick makes Morty help him, and Morty has just kind of accepted their dynamic as part of his life. If Evil Morty just kidnaps Rick and leaves the mainline Morty to his own devices, he'll have to choose to try to save Rick or not. For the first time in his life, he'll have the power to decide if his and Rick's relationship is really worthwhile to him. Morty will be able to decide for himself between having a normal life and the extraordinary one that also comes with all of Rick's baggage. Morty also taking on Evil Morty to save Rick would also prove how much he's grown since the first episode and how he isn't as useless as many others claim he is. Although he was introduced as being rather dull-witted, Morty now knows more about Rick's many pieces of technology than any other central character. Morty is also one of the most emotionally mature and honest people in the series. He could recognize and process his own reaction to his parents' divorce rather well, and is acutely aware of how his family members are dysfunctional. Mainline Morty taking on and defeating Evil Morty would prove to himself, Rick, and everyone else that he's far more capable than what people give him credit for. Having Evil Morty be Rick's original Morty and then Mainline Morty beating Evil Morty would also help him understand that he does possess inherent value and isn't just one of an infinite number of versions of himself. It may not happen in the upcoming 4th season of the show, but it's almost certain that we'll find out that Evil Morty is Rick's original Morty before the show concludes in its next 70 episodes. There are just too many hints for this not to be the case, and it'd fit too well with the ongoing character arcs in the show. Time travel might not ever appear in Rick and Morty, but it's only a matter of time before this theory is confirmed to be true. What are your thoughts on this Rick and Morty theory and the future of this hit franchise? We'd love to know, and you're more than welcome to leave those ideas in the comments section down below. While you're there, be sure to like this video and subscribe to Behind the Screen. We have a rapidly growing back catalog of videos analyzing and breaking down some of the biggest shows, movies, and characters around today. We upload a new video twice a day, and you're not gonna wanna miss a single one. If you want to watch our newest videos before anyone else, be sure to hit that bell icon. That way you'll get a notification as soon as a new video goes up, and we promise that none of them are psychic shape-shifting parasites.